next year, our forecast is that export growth will slow down, still be positive, but we think it will slow to a rate of about 5 to 10%. Are we worried about that? No. This is a forecast which is based on the assumption that we have slow growth in the developed world, but we don't have recession double dip. If we have a double dip with negative growth in US, negative growth in Europe, then the risk is that the exports could dip further. If you look at the chart, you can see what happened in the end of 2008, early 2009, when exports and imports as well collapsed because of the financial crisis. With regard to policy on the yuan, on the FX policy, we don't anticipate any change in policy. If I could give you a perspective of one of our contacts in China, he says, well, we will continue to appreciate the RMB, roughly 4% a year, but we have higher inflation than most developed countries. US inflation is about 2.5%, 3%. We have 6%. So if you look at the inflation differential plus the appreciation, there will be a real appreciation against the US dollar, in other words, appreciation measured in real terms, of somewhere between 4, 5, 6%. And for our industry, it's better to have adjustment, gradual adjustment spread over a number of years. So we'll continue this policy. And over a period of 5 or 10 years, the real appreciation could be quite substantial. Of course, the companies have to respond to this real appreciation and to the inflation by increasing productivity. So the focus and the pressure is on the companies to increase productivity. We have a couple of charts here just to highlight. If you look on the right-hand chart, the dotted line is the rate of the CNY, that's what we use in the markets, the yuan versus the dollar, and it's going down. That means that it's appreciating relative to the dollar, relatively stable rate. If we look at the trend versus the euro, we can see that it's going up, even going up a little bit. That is to say, it depreciated relative to the euro when the euro was quite strong up until this summer, and then from this summer, the yuan has been appreciating, that is going down against the euro. If we look at a measure on the left-hand side, this is called the nominal effective rate. So that basically takes all the currencies based in China's trade patterns, and that shows that the currency has been relatively stable in nominal terms over the past 18 months. Property prices. You've all heard the predictions by Jim Chanos, many other people predicting that China's property sector will crash. Basically, these are based on a lack of understanding of the Chinese market. First of all, China has a very high savings rate. Most of the apartments which are purchased are purchased largely for cash, so it's not driven by leverage as happened in the United States. Also, there are a very large number of new families. Family formation is quite strong, and families generally buy apartments. Individuals, very few individuals buy apartments. When a couple get married, one of the most important considerations is where to live. We call this the mother-in-law factor. the mother-in-law factors, which is partly because of China's policy, one-child policy. There's an imbalance between women and men. There are more available men than there are available women. So if a girl brings home a boyfriend to meet her parents, the first question is, can you buy an apartment? It's true. It's true. And how do they buy an apartment? You know, a family that's just starting probably doesn't have the savings. So it is families pooling their cash, buying apartments for the young couple. So this is called the mother-in-law factor. And this is a reason why if you go to China and you talk to younger people, particularly our colleagues in our China office who are about 30 years old and just married and their friends, you ask them, what about apartments? And what they say is, we want to become a property slave. What is a property slave? That means you buy an apartment, you pay more than you can afford to pay because you're helped by your parents, but you want to get on the property ladder. Traditionally, the best investment in China has always been property. Property prices have been increasing over the past decade. Anyone who was lucky enough to purchase an apartment 10 years ago is now in a very strong position. And this is a very important factor that is driving the property market. But this is not going to be around forever because there are demographic changes in China which will be very important. One of the demographic changes is that because of the one-child policy, the new entrants to the labor force will peak about 2015, 2016, and it will start to trend down. So there will become increasing labor shortage. But there's another factor, and that's simply the fact that if you look back in Chinese history, the decision to privatize housing was taken in the 1990s, toward the end of the decade. Many families purchased apartments, and it's an aging population. So as people get older and die, they give their apartments to their children. So we have really the beginning of the inheritance of properties. This was not the case before because before the properties were not privatized. So private property, private apartments really got underway about 15 years ago. So this means that as we move beyond 2015, 2016, that the dynamic in the property sector and new household formation will slow down. It's not going to collapse, but it's going to slow down. So that means that the property sector and property investment will be less important in driving growth. Do the Chinese know this? Of course they know this. So what is their plan? Their plan is that they have to develop domestic demand drivers. So they have to create conditions so that growth is sustained by domestic consumption, like in most Western countries, rather than by investment, and particularly investment in property. So there is a transition coming. We will see the property boom changing, but it's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change next year. We still have probably 5 or 6 years before this transition, before the transition comes into place. Let's focus on the banking sector. Another claim is that because of the crisis in 2008, Chinese government instituted a stimulus program. There was massive new lending, and a lot of this lending went to local authorities to invest in infrastructure in particular, but many other projects. So the perception is that there are so many debts which potentially could become non-performing loans, NPLs, what we call them. And some people have argued that Chinese banking system is facing a massive write-off of non-performing loans. I've spent most of my career in banking, and back in 1982, working in a New York bank and having a large exposure to the developing countries, we were technically bankrupt. Our capital was much less than our potential loans, but what happened was that the government engineered a relatively long-term adjustment for the banks, and the same thing will happen in China. So to the extent that there will be write-offs on the loans, these will be spread over the next 3 to 5 years. The banks currently are very profitable, the Chinese banks, the major Chinese banks, and the government, the banking authorities are sending the message to the banks that they need to increase capital, they need to increase their reserve. So to the extent that they have to write off these loans, they will be able to write off loans without causing any significant impairment in the banking system. Could there be problems? Yes, there could be problems. Problems would likely be with small city banks or regional banks who don't have a diversified portfolio. But these will, in the total financial system, this will be extremely small, and it will be dealt with the same way it's dealt with in Western countries, which is the government will simply have to step in and solve the problem. So the prospect of a financial crash, very unlikely, very unlikely. Now, another story that you see in the newspaper is about what is called the shadow banking system. So the shadow banking system is lending and investment that's taking place outside of the formal banking system. And there are all kinds of stories about what is going on. Now, the point I would make is that the government would like to implement capital market reform, financial market reform. They want to liberalize, but they don't quite know how to do this. So one thing that they're doing now is they're encouraging what are called wealth management products, which are not loans, not deposits, investments, but typically what this is a financial structure that is tied to a fixed income rate, such as the Shanghai interbank rate. It pays savers a slightly higher rate of interest. The bank can take the risk or pass on the risk, but what it does is it provides another outlet for savers to invest, and this is primarily targeted at the more wealthy individuals. So our interpretation is that the PBOC and the other banking regulators would like to encourage wealth management products because they would like to experiment to see how this type of de facto liberalization can work. Now, there are other kinds of shadow banking activities which are undesirable. And without a doubt, the banking authorities will crack down on those kinds of unauthorized lending activities. So yes, there are some activities in the shadow banking sector which cause concern, but on balance, our expectation is that the authorities will tolerate and even encourage what they consider to be good shadow banking projects, such as these wealth management products. Let's look at, as we close and then open for questions, just a longer-term outlook. Next October will be the Party Congress. At the Party Congress, the current leadership will retire, will step down. President Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabao will retire after 10 years. A new leadership will come in. In October, we anticipate that Xi Jinping, who is one of the senior members of the current Standing Committee of the Politburo, will be appointed as the head of the party and the president. And we anticipate that in March of 2013, about 6 months later, the National People's Congress will appoint Li Keqiang as the new premier to replace Wen Jiabao. We think that this transition will have an influence on government policy. Politicians in any country would like to go out on a good note. It's not just in China, it's in every country. And for this reason, we think that policymakers will take whatever measures are necessary in order to smooth the transition, the economic transition. So during next year, we anticipate that growth will slow down a bit, but it will still be relatively strong. As you see on the chart, we anticipate that growth will be about 8%, 8.5%. And this is largely related, as I mentioned before, to a slowdown in exports, which is caused by external factors. If external demand falls more than anticipated, we think that the government will respond quickly with new subsidies. And these will be what I call targeted subsidies. So they will target specific commodities, such as to reduce the financing of cars or reduce taxes on new purchases of cars, which are very important for the overall economy. We do not anticipate that there will be another push into infrastructure such as happened in 2008, 2009. The other development that I would like to highlight, which is the transition with the new leadership. The new 5-year plan, the 12th 5-year plan, talks about, which runs from this year, 2011, talks about targeting 7 key industries. These are industries which have the characteristics of high tech in some aspects, and this is what we call the going up the value chain. China does not want to be known for labor-intensive industry. It wants to move up the value chain to move into more high-tech sectors. So we have bullet trains, of course, aircraft manufacture. Other key sectors will be offshore drilling technology, rather important for Brazil, and new materials, agricultural, biotech, IT, chip manufacturers. So we anticipate that the new leadership will be instrumental in inaugurating this new push in moving up the value chain. Our judgment is that